What's going on, everyone? Welcome back along to the Super Rugby preview show. Now, 8 teams have become just 4. That leaves 2 matches remaining in this penultimate round of Super Rugby playoffs. Now, of course, as I did last week for the quarterfinals, I managed to drag along 3 crazy guys with me on the journey to see who we think is going to make their way towards the grand final. So as always, these parts are just all our opinions. Leave your thoughts in the comments below if you want to have your say as well. But let's get on and see who's going to be joining us and, of course, what they think. So our first guest to the channel is making a triumphant return after a big week of picks last weekend. It is the Driving Maul. How was your weekend of watching quarterfinals rugby? Welcome back to the channel as well.
Thank you very much for having me back. Yeah, no, it was good. I got to watch 2 of them and also do some live post-match reviews, which is good fun. Had you on for that. And so we've talked about some of this stuff already, but hey, let's do it all over again.
It's always good for that. And then you'll be able to do another one this weekend as well, which is always good. You're going to get at least one more into the bank.
Just one more, yeah, unfortunately, because the Sharks didn't do me the favour of beating the Lions, did they? They stuffed it up in the end, and that I'm so close having 2 shows next weekend, but it was just the one.
So other views will be dropping now big time for the Driving Maul channel. But I was just talking about a great picking week for you. You got all 4 of the teams correct that were going to win their quarterfinals. So, you know, even more points for you on your SuperBru picks as you scream up the table from 8th, I think you were. We'll be checking that out at the end of the video anyway. So if you want to see how he's going, you can catch up with that. And for our second guest on the semi-final preview, we welcome back the one and only Brett Hartley back to the channel for his views on the semi-finals. So, welcome back to the channel first and foremost. How'd you find your weekend of rugby? As a Sharks fan, I expect you should have been happy, but I'm getting other vibes.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on again. Like I was saying before, a very good weekend of rugby overall. Some really some quality rugby throughout all the 4 games on the weekend. But as a Sharks supporter, I was a bit devastated last night. Like I was saying before, I would rather lose by 15 points than lose like that, by 2 points from a 55-meter kick in like the 78th minute. So, really glad the Sharks played quite well, but still devastated at the same time.
It's the best Sharks performance of the year, I think.
Yep.
It's good though. Finals rugby comes around and they actually put on their best performance, and that's what it's all about. Unfortunately, it wasn't quite enough, as every New Zealand fan was getting in behind the Sharks, trying to get them over the line. But alas, it did not happen. And finally, last but certainly not least, the Scottish Cannon back to have a talk about his picks and a look at the semi-final as well. Welcome back to the channel, of course. And how was your weekend of watching quarterfinal action?
It was pretty interesting. I really enjoyed the Lions and Sharks go at it. That was a great match, and I thoroughly enjoyed the Friday night match. The Kiwi Derby sort of let everyone down, but it was a good weekend overall.
And the 4 quarterfinals ended with the Canes 35-16 over the Brumbies, and the Lions, as we talked about, 23-21 over the Sharks, giving those 2 a meeting in semi-final number 1 or 2, whichever way they do the fixtures. It's too early yet to tell. Second, of course, the Crusaders went over the Highlanders in a rain-drenched typhoon in Christchurch 17-0, and the Chiefs got up over the Stormers 17-11, and I think a surprising result, but that one really was torn completely between the pickers and what people thought about that one. But we'll start at the beginning. We'll start with the Lions versus the Hurricanes, just because that's the first one on my list, and I'm making the fixtures up myself. Overall, what were your thoughts on that quarterfinal victory by those 2 teams?
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously the Lions made much more of a meal of it than we were expecting. We thought they would take the Sharks down quite comfortably, but the Sharks clearly stepped up on the whole. I've only seen the highlights of that one, haven't seen the full game, unfortunately, but they seem to step up. Yankees seem to have a bit of a flaky game, which he can do on occasions, especially those big occasions. Remember last year down in Wellington, he didn't have a great game against the Hurricanes in the final, did he? So is that one of his weaknesses? Is he not a big game player? That could be the issue for them. They did enough to get themselves home in the end. The other one, the Brumbies, just some senseless play, and the Hurricanes won that one quite comfortably down in Canberra on a very cold night.
Look, both of the teams had pretty decent victories. Obviously, Hurricanes are a bit more impressive, or not impressive, but a bit more comprehensive. Hurricanes last week didn't start quite well against the Brumbies. Brumbies had a good start, but fizzled out at the 40th minute, and by the 60th minute, the game was already sealed for the Hurricanes. So, very cold night in Canberra. It'll be hard to get your body going, hard to get through work. But I think Scottish Cannon said it was like -5 or something stupid like that. So, it's difficult to play in conditions like that. There's two quarterfinals this weekend with dreadful conditions. So, Hurricanes did well, had the game sealed. Wasn't too stressed for them in the end. Overall, good victory, good performance from both the Barretts. Lions, opposite end of the spectrum, I would say. In terms of their capacity to perform, they definitely didn't have a good game. To their credit, the Sharks did have a really good game. I'm obviously really biased as well, being a Sharks supporter, but Sharks played really well. As you said, their best performance of the season. Lions, just their kicking was dreadful. Both Yankees and from Combrink as well. Combrink missing a kick straight in front of the post. I think they missed somewhere near 15 points from kicking, I think, in that game. So it showed how important just goal kicking is. Adding an extra 2 points, adding an extra 3 points is. Technically they should have been well clear of the Sharks by the time that Combrink was able to slot that 55-meter kick. So, it's looking to shape up like a good game.
The Lions got out of jail, didn't they? Really got out of jail. They left a lot of points out on the field. Yankees was not kicking them well off the tee at all. And I think they left about 13 points in kicking alone out on the field. But the Sharks really came to play. They scored some great tries. That was my favorite match of the weekend, actually, the South African derby.
I'd agree.
That kick from 58 meters out on the angle was absolutely amazing to win the game. He missed one from about 25 or 30 out a few minutes earlier. So how do you miss that one, but you kept the 58-meter one? Makes no sense to me. But, man, that was a cracking match. And the Canes match was great against the Brumbies. The Brumbies were in it for 70 minutes and just faltered off. They're hanging by a thread the entire game, but the Canes just came over the top of them as a lot of people thought they would.
And that's a good thing you mentioned about the whole quarterfinal weekend, was they were all pretty close and tight games. The Hurricanes game was probably the biggest blowout in terms of score, but the Brumbies did lead that at half-time. So from that aspect, it was a pretty close and tight weekend. But the Aussies are all gone. No more Australians to worry about, not until next year. Great.
Gets the focus on the Bledisloe, Michael Checker. Have you seen the training they've been doing?
I haven't seen the training, but I've seen the team, and that was enough for me.
They have done relentless fitness training. Absolutely.
Well, they're going to need it.
Yes,
they're going to need it for sure.
Indeed so.
That does lead perfectly on to my next point. You talk about the Lions and how they almost got out of jail for free in that matchup, and you brought up some key points about how they play already. But do you think the way the Sharks come into that match and how they really brought something completely another level from what they had the week before in the last round robin match, do you think teams like the Hurricanes who are going over there now, do you think that they have learnt something, and do you think they've come up with ideas and they'll be learning ideas from that match as how they can expose some weaknesses in this Lions team who up until now have looked pretty formidable?
I think they'll also be learning from last year. I think we'll see a lot of what they successfully did in the final. They will try and do again in this semi-final. I'll say getting Yankees face, get him to make mistakes. Try get as much, obviously, as always, get as much of a forward platform as you can as well. And then let Barrett pull the strings and do his thing. Run when he wants to, kick when he wants to, and play it as per usual. I can't see. I mean, obviously. Going from a very cold situation to a very hot situation, so it'll be a nice firm track for them. Obviously, we're not going to see them play the same game as they did against the Brumbies for sure.
Yeah, definitely. I think, especially, I know the Hurricanes would have at least been following that game quite closely. Obviously, getting ready to buy their tickets, see where they're going next week. But I think it's funny because it's hard to actually see what the Sharks really did to squeeze the Lions that much. I think the main way they were able to do that was their defence, especially in the first half. The defence was just airtight. The Lions couldn't get a break. They couldn't. The Sharks were rushing up uncharacteristically. Sharks were all rushing up, putting pressure on all of their defenders, all of their attackers at the same time, even on the wings, constantly pushing up. Luckily, the Lions didn't put in too many kicks behind the Sharks because that could have been a bit of a different scenario, but. Yeah, Sharks put good pressure on them, really squeezed the Lions, and going to halftime with a 14-point-3 lead against the Lions is a pretty good feat.
Well, of course, you would take a lot of confidence in that the Lions are beatable. I mean, the Sharks got destroyed by them during the regular season both times they played, and then in the the qualifying final, the quarterfinal, completely bring it to them, and probably should have won that match. But there's definitely some small holes in the Lions' armor, as you've said. I mean, but if Yankees actually brings his kicking next game, the Canes are going to be in for a bit of a problem, because again, 13 points left out by kicking alone is really, really difficult. But same for the Canes. After the match, Perinara against the Brumbies came out and said that was absolutely horrible the way we played. It was absolutely awful. There's drop ball, forward passes from Bowen Barrett to Geordie Barrett, 5 meters out. They weren't themselves the Hurricanes, and maybe that was the way the Brumbies played in the first half. But in that second half, they steadied the ship and played much, much better. So I think they need to get themselves right before they start to worry about the Lions, because, if that was against any other team in the Super Rugby finals, the Canes probably would have been close to being knocked out there.
Indeed, and I think that's what I took from their match too. The defence, the rush defence, are completely bamboozled. They were going backwards with possession, and they seem to not really deal with it at all, and they just seems just trying to get out of it by doing the same odd things. And the Sharks, that's really what put them on the front foot and forced mistakes and allowed them the opportunities. I think the offloading game at some points by the Sharks was just ridiculous. That first try, I think it was, or maybe the second one, I can't quite remember.
Yeah.
With those ridiculous, insane offloads. I mean, Sonny Bill, when he's dead and he's an angel in heaven or whatever you believe in, he wouldn't even do those sorts of things. They were just ridiculously good offloads, and that was key to their attack. Sadly, it did fade away as the match wore on, but they were really hot in that first half. But also making a big difference is going to be things like travel for the Hurricanes. They're making a big road trip over to South Africa. There's a few things about their game that people would pick up on, the way they started so slowly, the travel factor, things like that. What other areas do you think the Lions will be looking at to target in this Hurricanes team as they make their way over to South Africa?
I think the Lions will want him to play their game, basically, and it's going to come down to make sure a lot of the New Zealand teams, especially on a hard track, love to counter-attack, don't they? So look after your own pill. Don't give them turnovers. When you kick, you either hit it, make sure you've got a good kick chase, or you've got it in the stands, so there's no quick lineouts. That's going to be it. It's going to be keep the Hurricanes as far territorially in their own half as much as possible, and don't give them counter-attack opportunities.
Probably, I think for me the main one would be their travel, which is a pretty obvious one. The travel in Super Rugby is unique to probably every other sporting competition in the whole world. Having so many different time zones and having to travel between those time zones so frequently is insane. So for the Highlanders to be in New Zealand, Australia, and South Africa in 3 consecutive weeks, that's mad, that's crazy. Especially you got to fit in training to that as well. So I think it won't affect them too much. They are professional athletes, and they do prepare for these sort of things. But I think especially they'll be quite slow off the gates, and if the Lions really want to make an impact, they've been in South Africa for quite a while now, so they have no travel fatigue or anything. So they can really push right off the blocks and possibly get a buffer between them and the Hurricanes. First up, I think the Hurricanes will take just maybe 10-15 minutes to properly settle into the game.
Oh, obviously rolling maul. Lions got one of the best rolling mauls in the competition. I think the Sharks maybe had a slightly better one, but the Lions got a very good rolling maul, just like the Brumbies did. You saw what the Brumbies did on the weekend, scoring a try from the rolling maul and coming close a couple other times. So that's something the Canes would definitely have to look out for. Need to sack that maul before it forms. I don't know why more teams don't sack that maul 10 meters out, because it's such a, if you sack the maul, they can't go anywhere. And it becomes a ruck. So that's what I would be doing if I were the Canes. And I mean, you've got to maybe tackle Lumape as well. Obviously, you've got the big running ball runner coming in the midfield there for the against the Lions. So a few small things. Rolling more, I think, would definitely be something the Lions tried to do on the weekend. And they'll be going for goal as much as possible. I'm not sure the Canes will be doing that though, because they love to go for the corner and try and score a few meters out.
You're right about that. But we did notice in that quarter-final match against Brumbies, they did kick for goal a lot more than they had done throughout the whole season. They had a little bit, not as much as a normal team would have, obviously, but still, they had a little bit more inclination to go for goal rather than touch, which gives me that feeling they may, as the competition progresses on, look for goal a bit more, maybe if they're in a tight matchup. There's been a lot of talk over the week, though, over the whole season, I should say, really, about this whole rubbish thing about how the Lions, their sort of fake position at the top of the table and all this sort of rubbish. I'm sick of seeing. I read an article in the paper this morning about the quarter-final match and how it was, a fabricated result because the Lions have never played a New Zealand team. But it goes both ways, and I've said it for the last few weeks now about how the New Zealand teams never played the Lions either, for that matter. Do you think the teams are going to have to adapt to how they play, knowing that they haven't faced each other? They've never met the Lions. The Lions have never met a New Zealand side, especially the Hurricanes, a team, how they do. They score tries, they score lots of points, and they have, a pretty big flair game. Different styles meeting for the first time. Like you said before, they've got their own styles they'll concentrate on, but does that come in the back of their mind that they're going to have to try and, play a game that they think they're going to match up against because they don't know what to expect?
Oh, what absolute beep, beep, beep. Look, fine, the All Blacks are the best team in the world. The Super Rugby sides are most of the best Super Rugby sides around are in New Zealand. That's true. But come on now. This absolute rubbish that any game that's not against a New Zealand team just doesn't count, therefore let's not worry, therefore that we're getting arrogance out of New Zealand is getting a bit old. England's run of so many wins, that didn't count because they didn't play the All Blacks. The Lions making the finals doesn't count because they didn't play the All Blacks. New Zealand sides. Absolute BS. Sorry, but I've had enough of it. So it is absolute rubbish. The Lions beat the Chiefs in Hamilton last year. The Lions made the final last year having played New Zealand teams. They can play New Zealand teams. These two sides played each other last year. Their styles haven't changed massively since then. So no, they know what they're coming up against, give or take. We have so many analysts. We have so many cameras. There's so much going on. They know what they're meeting. It's all absolute rubbish. And this idea that they're not worthy of their position is also absolute rubbish as well.
Thank you. I 100 million trillion % agree with every single word you said. I read the article in the paper this morning and I was going to write the guy's name down and call him out for being a complete and utter knob because he previewed each quarterfinal and he said Lions, Sharks, and he said, I'm putting this one in the who cares basket because no one really cares about this because the Lions don't deserve to be blah, blah, blah. And I thought, what a load of shit. What a load of crap.
Absolutely. And because we don't, the New Zealand, there's too much rugby to watch every single game every weekend, all right? So the New Zealand public basically don't watch the South African derbies because they're in the middle of the night. So what they watch is they watch a show over here called Rugby Nation. And what they've decided to do is decide that basically Kiwis don't care about South African derbies, so they will give 60-second highlights per game for those, and they'll concentrate on the New Zealand ones. And so because the New Zealand public don't see any of the South African teams playing really, unless they're playing the New Zealand side, that's why it's considered fake rugby that we just don't care about. No, it's because the media has decided they're not going to show it, and so you're not going to know about it. And it's really poor.
It is extremely poor, and I think as a country, New Zealand is, I don't know what you think about this from a more of an outsider prospect than probably the rest of us see, but it's a very naive and close-sighted kind of fan base on what they know, because they see New Zealand, Super Rugby, they see a bit of Australia, but they don't see England, they don't see the Viva Premiership, they don't see the Pro 12. All they see of them is when they really tour or when the All Blacks go over there and, the hardcores get up at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning to watch those end of year tour tests. But I'm interested to know what you think. Is it very naive? I think it's extremely naive in the opinions of New Zealand fans of overseas rugby. Like, what they don't know, they don't have any respect for or any interest in at all.
Yeah, it's a bit naive, but it's also the press. I mean, that's what everyone had a crack at the press during the Lions tour because it was so awful especially by the New Zealand Herald, and the stuff wasn't much better. I'm watching the I said Rugby Nations Night, which is going to be one of the big one of the shows that it's one of the few rugby shows that's on free TV. So it's one of the few ones that people actually get to see, and it's showing you highlights. So it's one you watch, and they there's some new rugby trials coming in, and the first thing they say is, "Oh, World Rugby's playing around with the rules again. We don't want that, do we?" It's like, geez, the whole message, the whole tone from New Zealand is right. You know what? People click on stuff that where you complain and say something's rubbish. So you know what? Our tone on everything is going to be, it's rubbish, unless it's one of our teams, in which case we are going to stand up for them to hammer tongue and nail. Otherwise, we are just going to rubbish everything because because it's controversial, and controversy gets clicks. And basically, we need all the advertising money we can get. And so that's basically what people are getting fed. They're getting fed a bunch of journalists going, okay, I've got to say it's bad, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent, who cares? I've got to say it's bad because that's what gets people to read it.
Yeah, exactly. Agree with you on that one as well. Media is pretty much a big factor to blame for what the whole sort of thing is. Lions tour, you're right, was terrible, and this whole Lions thing, it seems to be a Lions thing, doesn't it? Lions, South Africa, Lions from Britain and Ireland, but it's very very naive, I think, and yeah, people do follow it like a religion, but it's a small country, I guess, and it's very secluded from outside outside forces, outside kind of medias, for lack of a better word of that. Yeah.
It needs an alternative media to push forward the big fight. But yeah,
with some good sponsorship to their side.
quick. Whittaker's, I love your chocolate. Oh, wrong way. There we go. Sponsor me. I love your chocolate. It's great. No, so it's unfortunate, but it's what people are getting peddled. And so if they're getting told it's rubbish, they're going to believe it's rubbish because they haven't got time they're playing on their Xbox all the rest of the time anyway, so they don't have time to search out the real story. But it's not just that one journalist. I mean, there were a couple on Twitter today, and I just was a bit busy, didn't get time to reply to them. But I've been looking around for a good tweet to go back on this and have a rant because it's getting old. It really is.
Not one bit, no. Are the Lions completely new to Super Rugby? Have they just joined this season? Because it really sounds like it. It's not like the Lions played the Kiwi teams last year, which they did. It's just preposterous, this whole thing. It's getting really old. Constantly listening to, I find a lot of South African fans as well saying it from the other conference. You guys haven't played Kiwi teams. You're not the best in Super Rugby. Kiwi fans are saying it. Some Australian fans are saying it. It's just a load of rubbish, like you said. And, the Lions played them last year. They play a very similar style of rugby to New Zealand teams. Other teams like the Stormers and Sharks are starting to play a more New Zealand style of game, running the ball more, kicking it less. The Kiwi teams, are they the best in Super Rugby? Yes, they are. But in the grand scheme of things, you're going to play a Kiwi team. If you're a good team, you're going to play a Kiwi team eventually. So, they'll play a Kiwi team this week, and if they win, they'll play another Kiwi team next week. So, there's no use arguing. In my opinion, the Lions are the best in Super Rugby. They showed last year and this year. So, I don't think there's any validation to that argument.
You brought up a good point. To be the best, you've got to beat the best. Sooner or later, whether they play them or not, they're going to have to face a New Zealand team. They could go all regular season, and people can argue it's unfair that other teams miss out on the playoffs, like the Brumbies argument, but let's be completely honest, the Blues were the next team off the rank, and to be completely fair, they were never going to beat any of those top four teams on their day anyway. So it keeps the competition alive for the overall thing. At least Australia got some interest in the playoffs for 1 week at least. That's the glorious thing about the way that the competition is this year, is South Africa are going to have at least a couple of teams represented. Australia's going to have a team represented, regardless of how strong the other conferences are. If New Zealand completely falls over the next 2 years, they would have had at least a team represented. So it allows everyone to get involved, but that's an argument that's been had a million times over.
Well, it's absolutely rubbish, isn't it? If you remember last year, the Lions made the Super Rugby final, and they played the New Zealand Conference. So I don't think there would have been a problem regardless. I still think the Lions would have been the winners of that Africa 1 or Africa 2 conference, whichever the one they were in. The Lions, I think they've got a really good chance of winning. They get over the Canes. They host the home final. Crusaders have to fly. Probably the Crusaders fly over to South Africa, and that would be a cracking final. But it also adds more excitement. These teams haven't played each other in more than a year. What's going to happen? Different styles of play. What are the Lions going to show the Kiwi sides, and what are the Kiwis going to show the Lions? It's such an interesting, it's such a different match that they haven't played already, and that makes it more exciting. If the Lions and the Hurricanes already played this season, and the Lions won by a point, or the Canes won in Wellington or whatever, this game would not have as much aura around it because they haven't played each other. That talk is absolute rubbish. It adds to that intensity of this semi-final. The Lions would have made the top two regardless. They probably would have got 3 or 4 wins against the New Zealand teams because they've been playing that good. And sure, they clean sweep the Aussie teams. The only loss they've had this season was to the Jaguars, where they didn't play their full strength. They rested 15 players. So if you don't think that is worth being top of the league, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't believe you. But some would say the Crusaders have already won 14. They won 14 in a row and lost that final game to the Hurricanes. They played the tougher matches. Well, suck it up. That's the way it was. Move on. Get ready for next season if you're worried about the format.
Indeed, and if they did play New Zealand teams, it would have been 2 at home and 2 away anyway. Possibly, Who knows how the draw would have gone. They would have played the Blues in New Zealand, who they would have beaten, and they've beaten the Chiefs before. They could have easily gone 4-0 against New Zealand teams.
Absolutely.
So I don't think there's absolutely any merit to those comments either. But boy, oh boy, she has been rife throughout the media here, especially this week, which is absolute,
why are they
absolute
upset?
garbage.
They've got 3 Kiwi teams in the semi-finals. Do you think the Aussie teams are upset they have to play 5 Kiwi teams instead of the shitty teams over in Africa? I'm joking there, obviously, because the Waratahs lost to the Kings anyway, so it doesn't really matter. But I think that's a fair point. I think it's a fair point that what I don't think it's a fair point, I should say. They've got 3 teams in the semi-finals. If you wanted 4 teams in the semi-finals, you are more selfish than you actually think. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. Yeah, 3 teams is ridiculous as it is to have in the semi-finals. It's 75% chance of winning the competition.
Exactly right.
There's 100% chance you're going to have at least 1 team in the grand final. So you're already 50% chance of winning the final. So exactly right. Your final thoughts on the match and predictions of who's going to win this one? A margin, if you're so keen.
So I'm backing the Lions.
Margin.
Because the change of conditions, playing away, all that travel is going to hurt the Canes, and so I'm going to back the Lions on this one, as long as Janchi steps up. But it shouldn't be a big win. I'll probably go for Lions by 7.
See, that's quite big for you, though. That's quite a big margin for you.
I kind of go 3, 5, 7, or 15. So those are my margins. And 3 is where it basically could go either way. Either 5 or 7, but I'll probably go 7.
Yeah, that's quite interesting. I think the Hurricanes have got a pretty good chance. I think the Sharks have really shown that they're not as well. A lot of people here won't say that they're unbeatable because they don't even think they deserve to be there. But from my perspective, I consider the Lions, as soon as they got that number 1 seed, they were my favourite. Just because their home advantage is massive. But the Sharks went there, and sure, they're a South African team. They don't have to do all the travel. They went from their home to the Lions' home. It wasn't that far for them. But still, they went home and they put in an epic performance. I think that was an outstanding matchup. Kept me up till hours I don't want to speak of again. One of the best games, I think, of the whole quarterfinal weekend. That was a cracker.
Look, I found it really, really difficult to pick. I've gone, either way, it's going to be a close game, whether it's Lions or Hurricanes. I've gone Lions by 3. Might be my bias, Teddy, and I really want to see the Lions succeed. It's quite funny, they were the ultimate enemy last night, but now I'm supporting them for the rest of the playoffs. So it's quite funny how rugby works. But, the Lions, they had a wobbly game last night. Not a very good game at all. Like I said, if they get their kicking sorted, if Yankees gets his mindset right, there's something about him. He doesn't really know what to do in big games. Just Super Rugby final last year, both tests against All Blacks last year, game against the Sharks last night. Those are all big games where he hasn't shown up. So I think he's got a lot to prove next week. So look, if he gets his mental right, his mental strategy, his mental block or whatever you want to call it, if he gets that right, he's a great player when he wants to be. So if they get the kicking right, and if Yankees shows up, then they have a really good chance of beating Hurricanes.
Just finally, on the Lions, does this, like that match last night, does that make you a little bit less confident that they can go all the way in the overall for the final and everything? Shall they make it?
Yeah, quite worried. I didn't expect that at all. It completely blindsided me that the Sharks were able to unrattle them. Last week I didn't give the Sharks any hope at all. So, which no complaints here, obviously, but it might be good for them as well. It might give them the wake up they needed. They might have gone in to the game a bit complacent. Maybe they thought they already had the game in the bag. So it might actually give them the kick they need. So we'll wait to see whether it's a positive or negative thing for them.
Lions by 6 points. I think the Lions will cut up. They played a bad game last week. Canes also played a bad game last week. But I think the Lions will be better for it, stealing that win on the Siren. I think they'll take more from that game than they have from any other game this season. And for the Hurricanes, they got over an easy opposition that was the Brumbies. Aussie teams being worse this year. The team they beat in the quarterfinals won 6 games. So, the Lions should win at home in Johannesburg in front of a big crowd. It's really hard to go over to South Africa and take a win against the team that is the Lions at the moment.
Yeah, and it should be a cracker match between the two sides as well. Like you say, they were both, well, not lucky in the Hurricanes' perspective. They did play well for the second half, but both of them, I think, will be a bit more lifted from that performance as well as what they've learnt. And probably for the Lions especially, a bit of a kick up the arse to say, you guys aren't as invincible as you have been over the last 14 weeks of the competition where you haven't lost. So it should be a good one. You got Lions.
Last year's final as well.
It is too. It is indeed, which I don't think it will be any similar to that match whatsoever. I think it'll be a lot tighter this time round. So you've got the Lions going into the grand final, which will mean they're at home. Who they will face will be between the Crusaders and the Chiefs. So we're probably going to go from a nice weather, a nice pitch, a firm ground, running track, the sun in the sky, and, well, if last weekend was anything to go by, we're going to go back to the mud puddle with a river running through the middle of the park. Hopefully not, and hopefully it cleared up. But the Crusaders and the Chiefs, what were your thoughts on their quarterfinal wins?
The Crusaders were played perfect wet weather rugby against the Highlanders, dominated the game from start to finish. And close it out. And I think that's one of the topics for this weekend has been this has been finals rugby. We've had all the fun and games of the regular season where the Highlanders never kicked penalties. Pretty much through like 2 games they kicked penalties, something everything else they avoided it. They were kicking penalties against the Brumbies. We had the Crusaders playing some serious finals footy. Highlanders, you've got to play out of your 22, and that's all we're going to do. We're going to keep pinning you back all day long once we've got the lead. We saw it from the Lions actually as well. Just get that lead and then hang on to it. And we're going to get onto it next. I mean, there was a nice headline about saying that the Chiefs had clung on to victory against the Sharks. So yeah, this was a weekend of finals footy, and it was good to see that it was serious kind of test match finals footy. But to the Crusaders game, right? So basically they played good finals footy against the Highlanders who didn't, and that's what it came down to in the end.
Yeah, Crusaders Highlanders game. It was a horrible conditions. And I didn't watch the game, but I was closely looking at the score. And I looked at half time, it was 17-0. So I said, okay, the Crusaders got pretty good control of this game, and I looked full time and it was 17-0. So I kept actually refreshing my app because I wasn't actually sure if it was working or not. But horrible conditions, can't really expect much. I think watching the highlights of that game, that Liam Squire yellow card in the first couple of minutes was a pivotal point in the game. The Crusaders were able to get some points on the board, and the Highlanders were sort of out of it from there. The Crusaders were really well disciplined in that game not to let the Highlanders even score a point. So I have heard things all over social media about bad officiating, but I won't really comment on that because I didn't watch the game. So I'll let Cornflake comment on that if he wants to. But it was a good result for the Crusaders. Horrible conditions. Maybe the game should have been moved to Dunedin instead under the roof, but might have got a better game. But yeah, really good. I always say the clinical Crusaders. They're what they are. They always seems to be quite calm and in control of their games. So, and that's what they were there. The Chiefs, like you said, a very, very surprising game. I tipped the Stormers, which is surprising because I don't really tip the Stormers that much. So, look, that game was a bit scrappy in the first half. It was up and down. It was end-to-end stuff. Don't get me wrong. It was really good, but a lot of handling areas, a lot of niggly stuff. SP Murray for the Stormers was good for that game. But the Stormers, the Chiefs just kept going on, getting points from the board, and eventually the Stormers were just out of the game. So very good performance for the Chiefs, especially. Newlands is not a very easy place to go and win away.
I didn't see the Chiefs Stormers match. I saw that they won 17 points to 11, and I saw a lot of people were very upset with the Stormers' performance on Twitter. So I don't really want to comment much on the Stormers or the Chiefs. I will comment on the Chiefs, but I think the Chiefs coming back from South Africa, they've had to travel a lot within the space of 1-2 weeks. And even if they win this game, they've got to go back over to South Africa and face the Lions. So if New Zealand wants to win the Super Rugby, they've got either the Crusaders, the Hurricanes need to win. Obviously, if the Hurricanes win, there'll be a New Zealand winner. But if the Hurricanes win, coming home for that final in New Zealand, which will be a huge derby, or if not, over to South Africa, the Crusaders should get up in this match. Though they absolutely strangled the hell out of the Highlanders last weekend. And it's such a boring match. I have to say, it was such a bad match. I'd taken into consideration the awful weather in the Southern Island there, but at the same time, I would have thought the Kiwis would have played more enterprising rugby. I would have thought they wouldn't resort to the way that the British and Irish Lions have played in the opening few games of the league. I mean, should give me some entertainment. It's a Super Rugby, boys. But not taking nothing away from the Crusaders' performance. They absolutely played to the conditions. They kept it tight. They absolutely strangled the hell out of the Highlanders, and they were much the better team on that day. But I'm hoping for a more enterprising game. But it's hard not to tip the Crusaders with the Chiefs coming back from South Africa, and obviously the Crusaders already beating the Chiefs this year in Fiji.
Yeah, that's very true. You talk about SP Murray. I think he's had a real breakout season for the Stormers and for himself. On the referees, I think if you watch one game this weekend, you've pretty much kept what all the referees were like. Arguably soft yellow cards, but arguably you could say they were yellow cards. It was pretty much a trend throughout all the matches. So, you've seen one, you've seen them all. They're pretty much all pretty similar sorts of things. The Sam Cane one in the Chiefs game, it's just anything near the head. You can slap him with a feather and you'll get sent off with a yellow card, it seems, at the moment. So you touch his head, you're done, you're gone. So for the Crusaders, they put on a clinic, really, a forward pack clinic against the Highlanders in the rain down in Christchurch. Do you think they really can pinpoint any areas where they need to improve their game?
Well, that game and that game plan was all about the weather, right? So if they get the same weather, they'll play exactly the same again. But hopefully we won't have a continued state of emergency for flooding in Christchurch for a whole week. And it does look like it's going to be drying up. So hopefully that they'll have a firmer pitch. It's still going to be, let's be honest, soggy. It's not going to dry out totally in a week. With that amount of water, it was quite nasty. So they're going to play something similar, but with a little bit more expansion, I guess. And so that was a weather dictated one for them. Stepping up from that, it's hard to step up from that because that was a really clinical game from what they did. It's the Chiefs, though. That's going to be a bit of a different matter. They need to step their game up after the Stormers. I couldn't believe that the leading meter maker for the Chiefs was Stephen Donald with 66 meters. Now, I'm never confident with him at 12. I'm afraid, because nothing against Beaver. But let's be honest, he's not a nonu. He's not a crash up. He's something of a. He's not a powerful player, and I like to have a bit more balanced in my midfield personally. But no, he clearly had a really good game. You could see him make his breaks, then go, "Geez, my hammy's about to go. Quick, where's the?" And throwing a couple of wild passes, but he made like 66 meters off 4 runs. 2 clean breaks and 5. I think it was 5 or 6 defenders beaten. He had an immense game, and if you can do that again, that'll certainly help them out. But when you've got a back line of Kirbalu, Cruden, you put Donald in there, Anton Leonard-Brown, you've got all these All Blacks, all these dangerous players, and then you've got this old guy in the middle who is still 10 years younger than me, who you kind of go, you switch off on. I think there's all these other attacking threats, and then he just hits a gap because everyone's ignoring it basically, and that's fabulous. It's great to see an old geezer going well.
Look, it's difficult when the conditions are like that because it's not a very back friendly. Conditions like that aren't very back friendly. If you have a wet, windy game like that, your game is going to be forward dominated because that's where you can get over the advantage line. That's where the rough and tough stuff is, not too much fancy stuff. So in conditions like that, it would always be a forward dominated game. So it's a bit difficult to judge. The Crusaders have been pretty good in most areas this year. They don't seem to get very rattled in tough situations. Obviously, that drop goal against the Highlanders a couple of weeks ago was just one of the examples of, their reserve number 10 coming off the bench and slotting a beast of a, winning drop goal. So, it's just an example of how composed they are, how well coached they are. So, I can't really think of too many areas they need to improve in. They just need to stick to their systems, and they should be able to get the win over the Chiefs.
Honestly, it's hard to comment because they had to play such a different style than they have this entire season because of the conditions. So it's hard to take into consideration really much from last week. They played the conditions well. They kept it tight in the forwards, and if it is really wet in Christchurch again this weekend, they will want to pretty much repeat that same performance against the Chiefs. The Chiefs will be tired. Crusaders played in those conditions last weekend instead of was it dry in Cape Town? I'm pretty sure it would have been.
Oh yeah.
It's completely different conditions. It's like playing in the north of Scotland in the Highlands. So it's such different conditions. The Crusaders would have played in that last weekend, played the perfect game style, and why would they want to change much if it's the same weather and it's against another Kiwi team that you would have thought the Highlanders would have adapted to the conditions well because of where they are in the world, but they're taking on the Chiefs where it's slightly better weather up in the North Island.
But the difference being is that the Highlanders always play under a roof.
Exactly right.
So a lot of people have been talking about that also this week, about how that has affected the Highlanders' ability to play in terrible weather conditions. But that is another topic for another day. You've mentioned most of it already, but the Chiefs, interestingly enough, last time these two teams was in Fiji. The score was 24-31 to the Crusaders. Probably going to be quite different conditions. But are the Chiefs a good enough team? They've got the return of Charlie Ngatai this weekend, so I've read already he should be coming back for them. That could be a big boost for them, like you talked about the Stephen Donald sort of thing. But are they good enough to play that sort of game that we've seen from the Hurricanes that could beat the Crusaders to that final round robin match? Are they going to be able to cut out the errors if they've been making the errors in that important part of the match like they did? Well, they made quite a few against the Stormers. Can they do that against a team that can be so clinical like the Crusaders?
Well, we were chatting before about the number of errors, and I had a quick look at the turnover stats for them, and it was about 29 odd or something like that. Then I looked at the turnover stats for the Crusaders game, and again, that was in about the same sort of numbers combined. And again, for the Brumbies versus the Hurricanes, again, it was around about 30 turnovers from both sides. So I don't think that there were anything unusual for a Super Rugby game. Super Rugby is a bit faster, loose, and you do get turnovers because people try things. They try and attack on turnovers, which means you're likely to turn it over again. And people try the offloads. So they're attempting things. So I don't think they're necessarily that more error prone statistically than the other sides. It's going to be up front, isn't it? Let's be honest, because if you look at the two sides, you go, okay, so which set of backs do you want? I'll take the Chiefs backs. Thank you very much, Sonny. But it's a question of can Retallick, Messam, Leach, Sam Cane, can they get parity, or more importantly, can their front five, that front row, get parity against that all-black front row that's going to be coming at them from the Crusaders? And that's the big thing for me is, can they get the platform to release those players, or will the Crusaders just squeeze it out of them? And if it's a soggy pitch where Mackenzie can't turn on a dime, that's obviously going to bring the backs down a bit, and I think it's going to give the Crusaders the edge.
Yeah, for sure. The Crusaders are far from unbeatable, and I do give the Chiefs an extremely good chance in this game. Obviously, travel factors into it. You don't normally want to talk about travel affecting a game too much, but it all does add up. South Africa is quite a far way away from New Zealand, big time difference. They've got, and I think I saw that they don't arrive back in Hamilton until Tuesday, which would affect their training plans quite a bit. But I'll give them a very good chance against the Crusaders, especially if they can get under the Crusaders' skins. They just if they niggle away a bit, at the back of the ruck, stuff like that, nothing too bad. But if they get under the Crusaders' skins and try to rattle them, because if the Crusaders are composed, you don't really have much chance against them. So, if you can really take them out of their good mindset, I think you'll have a really good chance against the Crusaders.
Well, obviously, there's always giving hope to the Chiefs. I did say last week, whoever won that match between the Stormers and the Chiefs wouldn't be making the final. I'll be surprised if the Crusaders don't light up here. They've won 14 games in a row. They had won 14 games in a row, and obviously losing to the Hurricanes. I think they'll be too strong. Honestly, I don't know what the Chiefs will want to do. I don't know how they'll want to react to how the Crusaders will play, especially if it's really, really wet. Also, coming from a win over a South African side, again, the New Zealand had, the Crusaders had that, again, another match experience against a Kiwi opposition, which will be a very similar game style to the Chiefs. So I don't really know what else the Chiefs will want to do. I didn't see the game last week as well. I haven't really seen too many Chiefs games this season, to be quite frank with you. But I've seen pretty much all of the Crusaders games, and I think they'll be too strong regardless.
Yeah, but the Chiefs, to be fair to them from that match against the Stormers, I think their forward pack was quite good. The stats don't really show fully, but their scrum, I think, was very solid. They absolutely bulldozed over the Stormers on one occasion and blitzed them completely off the ball. I think they'll be up on a bit of confidence after that display, and they need to be too, coming up against a pack like the Crusaders are going to throw at them. But finally on this match, given the probable conditions we're going to get, we've already talked about the terrible rain, the travel that the Chiefs are going to have to be doing. Everything you really talk about favours the Crusaders in one way or another. What area do you think that the Chiefs are going to have to target over, that they can consider themselves better in an area over the Crusaders at this point? Where are they going to target an area that they think they should be able to dominate?
It's going to be that loose, broken field play, isn't it? In pit players like Lowe and Mackenzie and Cruden, Nartai and Flint Brown, you've got lots of really good runners, good ball players, and as soon as it breaks up, and if they can get any mismatches against forward and get themselves lined up against forwards, they're going to break that line and be in the clear. So that's what they've got to be trying to do. They've got to be trying to engineer their quick, agile backs in front of a lumbering prop, and just watch that line get broken. That's going to be their whole game plan.
I think if it's wet weather, like you said, which looks like it will be, I think the Crusaders definitely have a very distinct advantage. It's just the way they play and the way they can adapt. For the Chiefs to win, I think their forwards need to step up in particular, and they need to match, if not beat, the Crusaders forwards. Guys like Sam Cane have really got to stand tall, especially in rucks. You've got to disrupt the Crusaders ball. And they just got to stick together defensively, and don't let the Crusaders through, which is a lot easier said than done. But if they stay disciplined, especially in front of their goalpost, if they concede penalties in front of the goalpost, I think the Crusaders will happily kick it over. Should they be in a good situation to do that? So, if they stay disciplined, if their forwards step up and they can disrupt the Crusaders' ruck, I think they'll be in for a good chance.
Well, are we talking hypothetically in the same conditions as last week?
I think it should be a bit better. I would say
okay.
Cold. Go like in Canberra last weekend, similar to that.
Right. Okay. So I would try to outkick the Crusaders, which I know is pretty difficult. But with the likes of Aaron Cruden in your side, he's probably a better kicker than, I forgot the 10 at the Crusaders 10.
Richie Mo'unga.
That's it. I think he's a better player than Mo'unga, surely. If you can expose Dag at the back for the Chiefs and cause a few knock-ons, or get that box kick right, as the British and Irish Lions did against the Crusaders, and completely strangle the life out of the Crusaders. That's something the Chiefs could do. If they strangle, obviously don't kick the ball straight back to the Crusaders in awful positions, because we know what the Kiwi teams can do. If the kicks are absolutely awful, they go 70, 80 meters and score a countering attack try. So if they can get that kicking game right, if they can be smart, that Chiefs are also really renowned for outthinking opposition. An example would be the Chiefs, didn't used to contest at the ruck. They used to always never contest at the ruck, and they could actually go offside hypothetically because no ruck had formed. So the Chiefs will try and manufacture something that tries to strangle the life out of the Crusaders in a similar way to the British and Irish Lions did. Solid kicking and try and expose them for their insignificant weaknesses that the Crusaders have.
Yeah, I think you brought up a good point as well. You're saying that about the kicking, because we've seen the Crusaders had the advantage with the kicking because they had the likes of Mo'unga, they had the likes of Dag, who really took over more options than the Highlanders had in just Sopawanga. But you look at the Chiefs, they've got Cruden, obviously. If they play Donald, they'll have him there as well. They've also got McKenzie, who can kick a long punt, and James Lowe has a monster on him just like Israel Dag. So that could be, if it is really wet, like we seen last weekend, an interesting battle of the kicking, because I think that's where the Crusaders won it last week, because they had the kicking options and the variables to mix things up, whereas the Highlanders were stuck until they brought on Marty Banks, which made a bit of a difference, but the game was gone by that stage. That could be something where the Chiefs do actually have a big advantage there with the variety of players they have who can do the kicking. So I do expect both these games to be quite close, given the situation that they are. It is knockout rugby. It's playoff rugby. It's finals rugby. That's what the team should be playing. Like we've seen from the Sharks, it should be that passion from every single side. So who are you going to win this one? Crusaders, Chiefs, in the soggy conditions. Who are you going for?
Crusaders by 7.
By 7. He's going for a double up by 7. So Crusaders, Lions, grand final will be over in South Africa, Johannesburg. Lions, the hometown advantage. If you're going to guess it now, has anything changed from last week before the quarterfinals?
Not really. No, I still think travel's going to be the big thing. Playing at home, playing at altitude is going to be the things that help the Lions. I mean, the Crusaders are going to come off a few weeks of running around with a ton of mud in their boots, and the conditions are going to flip on them. Whereas the Lions will be they'll be in fair weather rugby form, and it'll come down to those forward packs. But I think that the Lions will be just more used to it and more comfortable.
Who's your winner? What's your margin, Chiefs Crusaders?
Yeah, I've got another somewhat close game. I've gone Crusaders by 10. Reason I went that is the game against the Highlanders last week. Most likely going to be similar conditions to that. They stayed really composed, really clinical. Highlanders and Chiefs, you could say they play similar types of rugby, similar game plans. So, I'm expecting a similar margin, probably a bit smaller. I'd rate the Chiefs better than the Highlanders. So, yeah, I pretty much just went that margin, but just a bit smaller. And I think, the Crusaders, will win by 10.
Fair enough. Good reasoning. That's quite interesting, actually. Chiefs over the Highlanders. What do we need for a 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th playoff to determine that. How will that be? Amazing. So you're going Lions Crusaders. It seems to be the popular choice to be going. Finals played tomorrow. Who would win?
Look, obviously it would depend. Obviously, if that happened, it'll be in Joburg. If it's Joburg, I'm picking Lions. If it's Christchurch, I'm picking Crusaders. So, being in Joburg, travel once again, always a huge factor in these playoffs every year. Hopefully, this week especially, I'm hoping Ellis Park will be reasonably full. Just on a little tangent, it was disgraceful how small that crowd was yesterday. I've been on this rant all year about Super Rugby crowds. It's just quite sad to see in every country this year, maybe bar Japan. Japan brings some pretty good crowds, but yeah, if the Ellis Park can get nice and full, and it's a final, so of course it would be. So Ellis Park, very I think in South Africa, stadiums are structured so fans are always right on top of you wherever you are in the stadium. And all our stadiums in South Africa are renowned for that. So it's a really tough place to go play. You have hostile fans on top of you the whole game, and you can pretty much hear everything they're shouting at you, whether it be Afrikaans or English. So look, if it's Joburg, I'm picking Lions, but it will be an extremely close game, and Crusaders have a huge chance to win that game as well.
So who you've got winner and margin for this one?
Crusaders by 15. I think they'll be too strong, coming back from South Africa, and the Crusaders playing similar conditions. Well, if it's relatively bad positions, Chiefs played in dry. I think the Crusaders will be too strong here. I'm sure the tab would be $1.20 or something to the Crusaders. A lot of people it'll be really high in SuperBru as well. 95% of people will tip the Crusaders. And what the final will be, the Lions and Crusaders, 14-1 versus 14-1.
Indeed, that's very, very true. Now, just to finish up with, remember last week, you'll see your quarterfinal picks where you win the Canes, Lions, Stormers, and Highlanders.
Yes.
You only got 2 out of 4.
I couldn't split the Highlanders and the Crusaders. That's why I went the Highlanders by 1 point. I didn't want to be
got the worst
boring.
out of all 4 pickers.
Yeah. I 1 point. I like to be controversial at times. So, and like I said on Twitter, it was sort of for the Crusaders fans that we have banter with on Twitter because they had lost 3 in a row up to the last game's obviously demolition of the Highlanders. I don't know what happened to the Stormers. I really don't know what happened to the Stormers. They would be very, very disappointed losing at home in the quarterfinal. A lot of people predicted the Stormers. Even you went the Stormers, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. I did indeed. I was surprised. Yeah. No, I think it was a similar match between 2 similar sort of sides, really, in the way they play. And Chiefs, they left it very late, though. There was a very, very late try that they scored to actually get that margin up to the 6 points. They were only leading by a point with, I think it was 5 or 6 minutes to go when they scored that final try. So you've gone Lions, you've gone Crusaders. Grand finals tomorrow. Obviously, it'll be in Joburg. Who's your winner?
I'm going Lions because I want the Lions to win. I want South Africa to break their drought in the Super Rugby since 2009. Be just a good fairy tale story. I'm a Scottish Australian, so living in Australia, I don't want to see Kiwis win anything. And that's why I want South Africa to win. I want the Lions to give it a good go, and hopefully, would that be their first title, the Lions?
I think so, yeah. The Cats never won it, and they were the Cats before the Lions.
No,
Yeah.
the Bulls had won it in the past, and
Yes.
yeah. So I would love the Lions to win it. I think they have not won, but it would be great for them to really showcase South African rugby on the up again.
Right, so there you have it. That is the thoughts of the Driving Mall. Thanks for coming on the channel to have a look at these semi-finals. And hopefully we'll get you back for the big one, the grand final, which will be next week. I can't believe it. It's almost finished already. It's been an amazing season of Super Rugby. But thanks for coming on, having a say. John, give any plugs out to anything of your own that's not a product before you pass this away today?
Yeah, bucket hats. Cheap to you, $100 each. No. Obviously, we have on YouTube live on a Tuesday night, 8 p.m. New Zealand time. We have Hash Rugby Chat, which where you can see me, Cornflake, and a few others talking about rugby and have a good old yarn around 5 key hot topics. And then Also, after that Crusaders game, I'll be having a post-match review, live review, and not asked him yet, but Cornflake will probably be up for that one again. So, yep, catch us for those two things. Obviously, I'm also putting out YouTube clips on a daily basis, all about rugby.
Excellent. I'll leave those links, as always, in the description below. You can go check them out, and be sure to tune in to Ash Rugby Chat on Tuesday, and of course the post-match thoughts on the weekend. But thanks for joining me always, and we'll see you next week. That just wrap it up. A bit of a quick look from Bred's perspective at what the semi-finals will offer. Once again, invite you back for the grand final preview next week as well. Hopefully see you there. Any final thoughts about these semi-finals and where people can get hold of you, which I'll leave in the description as always?
Yep. Yeah. Just follow me on Twitter. Cornflake will put it in his description. Just quick thought. I'm hoping the Lions will do well. It's always hope from South African fans for the Lions to do well. A lot of Sharks supporters actually last night supporting the Hurricanes now, so I've dropped. I've gone on the other side. A lot of Sharks fans I'm not happy about last night. So look, I'm hoping the Lions will do really well, and I'm still really hoping for them to win Super Rugby. So stay optimistic.
Fair enough indeed. That wraps us up. Thanks for joining once again, and we will see you next week. Until then, thank you and see ya. And that does wrap up our time with the Cannon. Thanks for joining me, and hopefully we'll see you next week as well. Any final thoughts on these semi-finals before we wrap this one up?
Not really. I'm hoping there will be exciting rugby this weekend, unlike that awful Kiwi derby last weekend. Hopefully they're both close games as well. And hopefully it's not too predictable. I'd love to see a few points in it. I would love two semi-finals that are pretty much mirror matches of that Lions-Sharks game, because it was absolutely amazing.
Indeed. Well, thank you very much for tuning in and sticking around with us, and we'll see you all next week again. Thank you. See ya. Okay, so before we have a look at my picks for these two semi-final matches, let's have a catch-up on where everyone sits in the SuperBru Predictor League, and we have a change for the first time in ages. We have a new leader in the Predictor League. Devon has finally done what no one else has done so far in weeks and overtaken Caleb 42N at the top of the leaderboard. It's only a small margin of 0.18 of a point. But the way the season has gone, it seems as if Caleb is going to run away with the league. We have a newcomer in to the third spot once again. Winard coming in from 2 spaces below, and a huge drop for the Stig, who drops down with the wooden spoon 6 spots into 9th. We have the yellow cap coming in from MFCFO. He's jumped up a couple spots into 7th position. Other guys who are on the show today driving more, you can see him still solid in 8th. He hasn't dropped. Everyone's moved around him, but he has gone nowhere. Further down the leaderboard, we'll try and find my picks. I've amazingly moved down 1. I thought I had a good weekend, but I've dropped down 1 spot despite my 3 out of 4 picks. And I still sit 22nd though, so I'm not too worried, because I'm still fending off the challenge of these 2 mugs here. Brett Hartley and the Scottish Cannon, of course, sitting in 25th. He's made a couple of spaces up there, Brett. He's a danger with just 3 games to go. But the Royal Cannon, he's way down the list now, 32nd still, only just managing over those 100 points, 103.66. He's not even the greatest time so far. Doesn't look he's going to get anywhere near my picks as I sit nicely in those low 20s. So a new leader in the Predictor, which is great to see. Devon making his way up. How about the Fantasy League? We'll have a look at that now. So unlike the Predictor, there is no change at the top of the fantasy team leaderboard. It is still MFCFO's Blues leading the way, and he's got a decent wee margin of about 70 odd points as well over the awesome Transcender Sloths, who sit in 2nd. The Solar Eclipses are 3rd. There's no change in 1, 2 and 3. Below that, though, there's a bit of movement everywhere, every which way you look. Dicks out the big movers, up 3 spots with the yellow cap. So good movements from him getting into that top 6 with the yellow cap. As we move further down the leaderboard, trying to find everyone else's sides. There are the All Flakes, sitting 24th, so I'm doing mid to low 20s in both of my leagues so far. That's not too bad. We're still ahead of the Cannons, which is my number one goal for both of these leagues, to beat that Mugs picks and teams. So that's where we're going nicely with at the moment, sitting down a couple of spots, but still in those good 20s as we make our way of just 3 games to go. So not much is going to change here. We have just 3 games, and the lead looks almost unattainable to be beaten. The Blues on top, Sloths in second, Eclipses third. Unbeatable, you'd imagine. So, 2 games to go. Let's have a look at what my picks will be for these final 2 matches. So it's only 2 games in this round, and it's going to be not too much to say really about this. We've talked about it for a long period with all the guests and everything as well, so you already know what I think about these games. But Crusaders Chiefs, that'll be our first one on Saturday evening. Really, the Crusaders have to be #1 favourites. Everyone's been going for them. It's tough to see the Chiefs pulling anything up from all that travel they're doing, not even being the better of the 2 sides either. The Crusaders sitting at home, everything is pointing towards the Crusaders doing the job here against the Chiefs. The weather is going to play into their hands. They've played in it before. The Chiefs are coming from a beautifully sunny South Africa. Everything just points the way of the Crusaders, and if anything, a little bit drier conditions could see them get even better. There's no real way that this team could have improved on the performance that they put in against the Highlanders last weekend. They're at home, that's massive, and their fans will be in full force, I'd imagine, and cheering on the Crusaders, cheering on the Hurricanes as they make their way to South Africa as well. But Crusaders for me, if this one comfortably as well it should be, I'm going Crusaders by 12 points. So we'll put this pick in while we're here. Crusaders by 12, and you can lock that one in. Done for semi-final #1. So Crusaders in the final. Who will they be meeting? Well, this is a torn decision. Lions, Hurricanes. A lot of people picking the Hurricanes, a lot of people picking the Lions. I think it's one of the most torn semi-finals that we've had in recent time. But my pick, ever since the start, when the Lions were so emphatically good, they've been determined, they've controlled, they've dominated, and they've done everything well so far this season. A little slip up right at the start, but they've been flawless ever since. They got the fright of their lives last weekend against the Sharks. I expect them to fully bounce back from that, and if anything, they should be the most determined side out of all the 4 that are remaining, because they've had their get out of jail free card. They can't afford another slip up, and when you're only in 4 teams left, you can't afford any mistakes whatsoever, because these teams are just too good to give you another chance or a 3rd chance. They will put the game to bed before you recover and realise what has gone on. I don't see the Lions having 2 bad games in a row, and the Hurricanes have a few problems they need to sort out. Despite that, they've still got to deal with all the travel. They've got to go to South Africa, and they have to take on one of the best teams of the competition. If you still think the Lions don't deserve to be in the semi-finals, well, watch this weekend, because I'm sure that they will put any doubters to bed and leave this one on the way to the final, where the Crusaders or Chiefs will have to go to Joburg and Ellis Park to take these Lions on. The only hope for New Zealand playing at home is, of course, if the Hurricanes win, which is very likely, but I'm still going to be picking the Lions to take this one by just 2 points over the Hurricanes. So it's going to be a really tight, really close matchup between those 2. It should be a cracker, and possibly worth the late night as well, staying up to watch the game in Johannesburg. But that is it. That is my quick picks. We've talked about these games quite a bit for our guests. Hope you all enjoyed the guys we've had on. Hope you've enjoyed their thoughts. As always, leave yours down below in the comments section, and you can catch all these guys in the description with their channels, their Twitter, anything of that. You want to follow these guys and see what they have to say on their own stuff, you can check them out as well. Go hit that subscribe button and give these guys your support. But that is it for me. Hope you've enjoyed the semi-final preview for Super Rugby 2017. I'll be back here next week with the grand final, the big one. Will it be Crusaders or Chiefs? Will it be Lions or Hurricanes? Who do you think is going to be making it? Let us know in the comments, and I'll see you all next week. Until then, take care.